actually from
2010.
And
yeah, 9 years ago.
I said, where was he?
Yeah. Dinosaurs roam.
And I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us this evening. And without taking up any more time, Mr. Obsidian, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, we can use the topic and start out by telling them about interacting. If I could remind you.
Okay. All right, interacting. Well, the topic, the class is called Danger People, and we'll be exploring basically the transformative power of MS dynamic and what happens when you start interacting, you know, with each other in this dynamic and also with the community around you. And the effects, some of them are pretty immediate, some of them can be cumulative, but it does change you, it transforms you. And what we have found is that many people aren't prepared for that transformation. And we've got some, you know, pretty pointed or pretty opinionated ways of thoughts about this.
Thoughtful ways of thinking about it.
And even, you know, in terms of how this has happened and how we've talked about it over the years, a lot of my perspectives have changed with regard to the MS dynamic and what it means and who it's for.
So if people want to make a comment or ask a question, they're going to raise their hand, and then that will release a sound into the room, and then we will be notified, and then we will take your question, and let's reserve comments for the end. But if you have a question specifically, that'd be really good.
Yeah.
So we can kind of stay on topic.
Yep.
So, because this class was originally 90 minutes, so we've compressed it quite a bit, but we're really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So let's start at the beginning, which is where all good stories start, at the beginning. Embarking on the journey. We feel like beginnings are sacred, or at least they should be. But I think with our tendency in the community, not only here, but, you know, wherever we go and talk to folks, we tend to value experience more than we value beginnings. And I think we should celebrate beginnings because we need to give people a balanced approach vis-a-vis, you know, this whole idea of becoming an expert in something. Because what we find is that folks get into the lifestyle and they want to create histories and they want to imply, at least, you know, even when they first embark upon this journey, that I've always been this way and I've been doing this for many, many years in my head, even though I haven't been doing anything in actuality. And we want to start encouraging. The only people who can encourage folks to change their way of thinking are folks that are already part of the subculture. We can't expect folks coming into the subculture to come into it with innovative things that will transform it. And if we want it to change, we need to change it.
And as far as that whole idea of beginnings, when we don't recognize beginnings as being sacred, what ends up happening is that we aren't aware of the gravity of what we're entering into. You know, we can be very unconscious about entering into these kind of power exchange relationships and just kind of stumble into them, you know, and just, oh, you know, that seems good, and this person, they were hot, and that seemed nice, talking to them, and that being enough. Whereas, and I think it's more, we can do that especially in our current state of evolution in our lifestyle, because so many of the norms are starting to erode. So in other, like in the mainstream arena, when you begin a thing, there's a clear line of delineation. You know, like if we're going to start, the beginning of a marriage, for instance, there's a clear start. Whereas when people are talking about, well, I've always done this, then there is no genesis point. And when you don't recognize that beginning, it can really affect the outcome because you're not being as conscious.
Yeah, so we should, well, the takeaway from that is, you know, it's up to us to tell people who are coming into this, good for you. You starting out. How awesome and how amazing.
You're new?
Good on you. You're a new person. And I remember when we think back to when we first started out, we were looking, most of us were looking for something. So when you think about where you started out, and you're on the journey of 1,000 miles, as they say, begins with that first step. What were you thinking? You know, not in the pejorative sense, but
no, really, literally, what were you thinking about?
No, what were you thinking about? What were your desires? What were you looking forward to? What were you looking, anticipating, wanting, desiring? All of those things are important and sacred, because guess what? Even though we give the idea of beginning short shrift, the reality is you only get that one chance to start. That first munch, that first going to the dungeon, that first picking up a whip, whatever it is, you only get that one chance to actually start. So that should be celebrated. Now, once you start, there are some detours along the way. The first is, most of us, when we come into this, we have no idea what this whole thing about community means. And the community can be a very seductive detour. We're motivated by our passions, by our longings, by our desires, by our, frustrations, whatever it is that's pushing you to, I want to do, there's something out there for me. And then when you come into this, people around you tell you, well, now you are part of the community. Now there are certain expectations that are in place. Community service. Like, wait a minute. We get into this to serve some, group of people because we share the same interests. I got into this because I like to do latex or pony play or, whips or rope or whatever it is that I'm like to do. Power exchange, absolutely. Brush, and that's like master slave.
Right, and I think that what makes it so seductive is because many people who come into this have spent a substantial portion feeling kind of like an outsider in the mainstream arena and feeling like, well, people just don't get it and they don't get me and I'm kind of outside. So once I come into a place where everybody's kind of like me in some way or another, they're like me but not, but at least I'm kind of understood, I'm accepted. It's easy to go so full forward in that you are not really taking into account that your journey is personal and individual to you.
Right.
So even within being a part of the community, your journey is still your own. It's like they say, we're all, no matter how connected we are, we're simultaneously all alone at the same time because we die alone, And so I think it's the same thing. Yes, we all have community. It's kind of morbid, but it's very similar. It's like, yes, we all have community and we're here for each other, and that's wonderful. And yet this journey that I embarked on for my own reasons, no one else can hold that motivating factor for me. It's my responsibility to hold that and to maintain that. And I think that's an important part, especially when you're building a dynamic.
So we talk about.
Oh, there's a hand.
There's a hand. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to go a little on that point. Is that while we are on our own journey, the community seems to want to make you fit.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And any advice along those lines?
I think that's natural. It's natural for any subculture to have mores and to have norms of behavior, expectation. So it's like if we were in MMA subculture, punching somebody as hard as you can in the face is acceptable form of interaction in mixed martial arts. Coming to a munch and doing the same thing would be unacceptable. So each subculture has its own mores, it has its own norms and things like that. So we can expect some of that, and some of that is healthy, I think, but when it's like we talk about freedom to versus freedom from. As long as it's freedom to, it's oriented towards what I want to accomplish and how it's going to, make things better, then I think it's a good thing for those norms and expectations to be in place. But when they start orienting towards the freedom from, you shouldn't do that because, the whole predator thing. There's predators. They're out there. They're lurking around, circling around our little munch, and it's up to us to, rally the flag and hold the smoky torches up and keep the predators at bay. That's a freedom from type of way of looking at the world. And that's one of the things that infects the community, and I don't think it has a good purpose. Yes, be careful. Yes, check in and make sure you know the person you're going to play with. But approaching everyone that you meet from a place of fear and let me see, I don't think you belong here. Let me see you pass to stay here. That's a different story. So some of them I think, yes, yeah, you do need those, and we're going to do them whether we need them or not. That's just how people are.
And I think that there's a place for, especially when we're talking about if people are a part of us or not a part of us, or how they identify. Are you really a tool slave, you know, a tool master, you know, versus a pretender? I think that's very difficult for a person to ascertain without being in a relationship. You know, I think that, yeah, I may think that you're not what you purport to be because I don't know you. But, you know, as there's a title of a book, you know, ask the man that owns it. You know, so it's like you're the ultimate definer of your own reality, but I think that even in the deciding upon terms, they should be descriptive and not prescriptive. You know, so I'm very big on that. It's like choose the term that describes what is actual to your reality as opposed to trying to pick a term and then trying to make yourself fit it. Because to me, that is freedom to versus freedom from.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, the culture's going to do that, but you know, ultimately, you came here for your own reason. Stick with that. You know, that's good enough.
Right. And particularly when you start talking about something like master slave, which, you know, we have the overall BDSM subculture, and then now you have master slave, which is a subculture within a subculture that has its own rules, mores, and norms, and things like that. So, in wanting to identify, you know, how do you get into that? What do you do? Where do you go? We tend to put those hierarchies in place, but really it's about personal, you know, desires and expectations. What do you want out of this? What's going to work best for you? Right. And celebrating that as opposed to the notion of telling everybody you're not doing it.
You wouldn't do this.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think MS is more of a template than a cookie cutter. You know, I think that there are some things that are defining, but they're not usually the things that most people think. You know, like I don't think that service in the traditional sense of the word is intrinsic to identifying as a slave. You know, I think that it's more about surrender and obedience. You know, which isn't all the same thing. So I think that there are certain things that are like the template. They form the template for power exchange or for master slave, even within the power exchange structure. But we're not cookie cutters. Gosh, I mean, how boring would that be?
Right. Well, you know, in terms of talking about this, I'm glad you brought that up. The MS relationship in particular, you know, and while we put this class together, it can change you in fundamental ways that many folks don't recognize. Like, for instance, in terms of you come into this, you know, well, vanilla sex, whatever that means, doesn't do it for me anymore. You know, I need more. I need different. There's got to be some, you know, asphyxiation or some, you know, some skin, some blood, something going on that is not what you see normally.
Just to make that a little personal, we actually have found we are in the middle of negotiating a foursome with a swinger couple from Swingers Big Club, and we became so anxious about this over the last couple of weeks as our next Saturday is approaching. We wrote them a letter, and we said, you know, we're just not altogether sure about this, and we may want to need to talk about it a bit because we don't think that we can get really excited with intercourse. I'm true.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because it's really, you know, that's true. I mean, we tried to have the effect.
Yeah.
Once. In a decade of being together. We tried it once, and it was like, what's wrong? He's like, I don't know. What's wrong? I was like, I don't know what's happening. He's like, okay, stop. Oh, I know what's wrong. Give me your neck. You know? Oh, okay, but you love me. You know? So, yeah, you know, your ability to do things that what did it for you can change, you know, and there's a quote about that, and I don't remember it directly, but it's like, you know, once you expand your desires, they don't go back.
Right.
You know, and, yeah, you know, so you can't think about that, you know, and all of the stuff that we're saying, that we're talking about in this class, we're not suggesting that anybody is doing it wrong or that they need to run away screaming. It's just so people can make very informed decisions and be aware of things. Because I think there are things that you don't know, like that.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have, how can this inform upon you? Well, if you have vanilla partners, if you're in a poly situation, you have vanilla partners, and you lose all appetite for vanilla sex, that
can impact your relationship.
Negatively impact your relationship, you know, and so take that into consideration as you're embarking on this.
Yeah. I mean, and other things, like, what's the answer to how was your weekend?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
So good.
I mean, when we get into this, what it is that we do, many times our answer is not really compatible with what we consider to be polite compliments in the workplace and things like that, or even, you know, in our familial relationships. Like, so what did you guys do this weekend? Well, we were in Arizona.
Yeah, there's always a
Yeah, or we were in Dallas this weekend.
Yeah.
So what were you guys doing? Well,
visiting some friends. You guys have a lot of friends. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure do. You know, a lot of people. That's awesome. You know, and it informs even upon when you're even talking about, even if you're not going out of town, when you're just talking about what you and your partner do, because you don't do things in ways that other people do them.
Right.
Like when I was working in corporate, and everybody wanted to get together and go out for lunch. Well, if they're going out to like a bar or something, I have to ask permission. You know, or if I had a coworker that was a male, one of Master's rules is that if I'm going to, you know, I do not go out with men without talking to him. So if I have a male coworker and he's like, hey, can we do a lunch? I really want to talk to you about some stuff. I'm like, hold on a minute. Let me get back to you on that. You know, and I'm like, I just hope that they ask me early enough in the day that I can get feedback from him. And if I know it's really close, I'll just say, oh, you know, he's not a good day for me. But I actually took the time to have an answer ready. You know, to walk through that process in my own mind so that way when I was approached, I wouldn't totally be, yeah, no, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I have to ask him. Who are you asking? You know, so thinking about that, and that's not normally something you have to take into consideration. You know, so recognizing that can affect you.
One of the things that we found is really profound in terms of the MS dynamic in particular, in relation to other relationship styles, is that, to use a garden metaphor, the MS dynamic tends to grow a very strong root system and crowd out the other relationship plants, if we want to call them that. And if you have a poly mindset, many folks get into this thinking that the MS dynamic is similar to other relationships.
To the other poly relationships.
Right. It's like, well, you know, we've got you have people and I got people, and you know, just make sure we communicate. Well, there's a number of reasons why the MS dynamic in particular, even if you are communicating, can take up more and more real estate to the point where it starts to crowd out other relationships.
So it's kind of like, you know, using that whole garden analogy, it's kind of like kudzu or mint. You know, everybody who has ever gardened knows if you do not plant mint directly in the soil because it will take over your whole life. It just will. That's just the nature of mint. And in the same way, yeah, and it's not that. Mint is delicious and wonderful and healthy. It does all kinds of amazing things, but that is the nature of it. It tends to just
bamboo, you know, those types of things are going to grow everywhere.
Yeah, so I guess in the same way that those are considered kind of invasive, I would say that the MS dynamic can be invasive, and I don't know that I necessarily consider that to be a bad thing, but I do think it's something we need to be aware of.
We need to be aware of that.
You know, because just like us knowing that mint is invasive and bamboo can be invasive doesn't stop us from growing those things. We just know that we have to put certain boundaries in place to keep that from happening. And
so how can the MS dynamic be invasive? In a regular relationship dynamic, egalitarian dynamic, you know, we enjoy each other's company, we share time with each other, things like that. In the MS dynamic, I'm going to be interested as a master in certain things that you're doing, even when you're not with me. You could be with your other partner, but how you dress, what perfume you have on, what color your hair is, what style it's in, you know, how you eat, what you eat, you know, how maybe you used to wearing flats. I like 3-inch pumps. Guess what? Now you have on pumps. And those types of things. So even if you're now, given the other person has the egalitarian outlook, they figured the lines of communication are open. We're communicating well back and forth. Everybody's good with everything. And right in front of their eyes, unbeknownst to them, the person is constantly being evolved and changed into the image that the master wants to see in that person, as opposed to what they were prior to engaging in that MSLM.
Right. And that slave lights up under that. You know, it's like, oh, this is wonderful. That is what love looks like. That's what is beautiful and delicious. And we don't think it's anybody's fault.
Right.
You know, but very frequently, it's been our observation and experience that the MS relationship tends to eventually crowd out other relationships and make them less viable. Not to a point, and by that I'm not saying that it ends them, so much as it is, it changes them in ways that for a lot of people are just like, I don't know what's happening. You know, so if your other relationships prior to the MS relationship took up this much space, you know, now because of the MS relationship is making them take up a lot less space. And it's not a question of love, and that's what makes it so challenging, because it's not a question of love for that person. It's not a question of care for that other person. It's not a question of saying, you know what, do I want to spend time with you? Do I find you interesting? Nothing is wrong with that other relationship. It's just that the MS relationship is such that it expands, and because the submissive or the slave in the relationship is being changed so substantially, and I think the master as well, sometimes what ends up happening is the other relationships end up being less and less compatible.
Right.
Well, it's like your needs are not being met by the other relationship, right? Because your needs have changed.
Right.
However, are we to be aware in a way to prevent this from happening, or aware in a way that when it happens we recognize why it happens?
I think both.
I think both.
I think it's both, and I think it really depends upon that's such an individual personal decision. You know, but I think it's both. I think, you know, in all of our years, and Master and I were talking about this before yesterday, because we were going over the class and stuff, and we were like, okay, so how many couples do we know that have done that, and that it's worked?
In a poly situation,
you know, in a poly situation,
where one of the relationships is MS and all the other relationships are. To this point, after all these years, I know of 2 that have remained viable over the years. Over the years,
and that doesn't mean instantaneous death. It's rarely like that. It's usually a lot more gradual over the course of 2-3 years until people are like, yeah, I really like you, I love you, I think you're amazing.
It's not the same.
But yeah, this just doesn't work for
me. And they part as
me.
friends, and everybody's good, but it's like the common denominator in all these situations is MS. You know, and that's just been our experience.
And we've actually talked to some people to think, because we're like, well, we've noticed this. I wonder if anybody else has noticed this. But we talked to people who've actually been in that situation, and yeah, that's exactly what happened. You know, and wow, you're the first people we've ever heard to really put it that way. And it was like, now I'm not saying run away from your MS relationship or run away from your egalitarian relationship. I think that, you know, like I said, just like with the mint, well, if you want to plant mint, because it is so invasive, you need to put it in a pot before you put it in the ground.
Right.
You know, and I think
it has some rigid boundaries around it.
Yeah.
Now, you wouldn't do that for another egalitarian relationship, typically. And folks may feel some kind of way about that. Like, well, what do you mean? You know, it's like, well, okay, if that person starts to change their personality, then we should have a discussion. If they start to change your political affiliations, we need to have a discussion. If you suddenly have a new hairstyle, we need to have a discussion. Why? Because in MS, that's what we do. You know, that's what masters do. So we need to talk about it. And talking about it, now we've got dialogue. Now we can, you know, figure out where we're going from here as opposed to reacting. Yeah,
and keeping our finger on the pulse of it, because, yeah, that's the difference between it and this dynamic, because in an egalitarian relationship, you wouldn't have to have those conversations, because if the person was changing their haircut the way they dress, the way they eat, all of these other things, it would be at their own, because of their own will. I just want to cut my hair. But when I'm doing that because of someone else's will, that is fundamentally changing me. And I think that allowing another person's will to supersede your own does change you. And thinking that it doesn't, I think puts us in a situation we can end up with less than desirable outcomes. Yeah. You know, so it's like, you know, recognize it, look at it, and say, okay, yeah, I'm noticing this. Can we talk about this with those other partners? And like I said, we've only seen a few couples, you know, 2 or 3 where this has actually been sustainable over a very long period of time. So you know, it's just a trying, but just like with the mint, sometimes you plant it in a pot and the roots are so strong that it breaks right out, you know, so it doesn't always work, you know, and that's coming from, you know, personal experience, because we had all kinds of structures in place in regard to our relationship when we started, and Master was married, and I didn't want the end of their marriage. I was, you know, they've been married for almost 20 years, and it was like I loved her, and I wanted us to all be together, but it just wasn't viable over time, you know, because I think somewhat because of the things that MS does, and then also because of emotional inflexibility on the part of the other partner.
Yeah. And also, yeah.
Barack had his hand up. Barack, did you still have a question? I saw you took your hand down, but I'll give you the mic.
I was wondering whether you felt that the aspect of exclusion comes. I should say, first of all, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I have seen it in my own life and other relationships falling away, but I have seen it not so much in some aspect of my relationships, but more a difficulty in vanilla people accepting things that I do, or even at a very light level, the way I am willing to talk about sexual matters as just normal aspects of life. Right. That's difficult. So the exclusion is not so much from me, but it's other people sort of wanting to say, oh, wow, you know, he's getting a little weird, and I'd really rather sort of go away.
Yeah. What constitutes normative behavior for us in the lifestyle in these types of relationships doesn't really translate. Right. You know, it's like we were talking about a couple of days ago about this whole notion. You see all these articles about side boob. You know, it's like, what the hell is that? Well, that's when somebody's out and they're wearing an evening gown or whatever, and you can see the curvature of the woman's breast from the side, which is apparently very titillating in mainstream society. And I'm like, okay, you juxtapose side boob against seeing somebody being fisted up to the shoulder. You know, it's like, I got nothing for you. I mean, who gives a fuck about it? Yeah. But we look at those things and consider that to be normal, acceptable behavior, or even in terms of the MS dynamic, in terms of service. You know, she serves me wherever we are, no matter what's going on. Well, if you're at a family reunion or just hanging out with folks who are in the, you know, larger, you know, culture, a lot of those behaviors don't translate very well.
Right. Yeah.
Are you getting his plate?
Why are you getting his plate?
And then it puts other people in an awkward position because they have to decide now, am I going to emulate these behaviors, or am I going to call them out as being, you know, not socially acceptable? And I've seen it go both ways. You know, we've been around people, and people look at you, and then all of a sudden they start being nice. You see the guy's face is like,
oh, you're my plate. Why is there food here? And then other times, you know, I've seen and experienced women actually being like, why are you doing that? You know, you don't. Well, I guess it's okay if you plan on continuing it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've been doing it for this long. I don't plan on stopping. You know, so it's very interesting.
And you know, it's not always on your side. I mean, whatever our preferences are as masters, we tend to have our own, you know, number line of acceptable behavior. Like, I remember when I was in my corporate days, one of the things that I allow her to do as my slave, cross her legs, you know. And so imagine I'm leading a meeting and I'm standing up at the whiteboard and I'm writing and I look around and out of the 8 women at the table, they all have their legs crossed. And I'm slightly irritated by that. I don't even know why I'm irritated. I'm like, the hell's going So there's something in me that wants to go, you, all of you, uncross those legs immediately. But that's not going to
Back to this thing.
I'll tell them that story. One time we were at but it changes both of us, not just the slaves, it changes the masters too, because now you're in a relationship where who you are intrinsically is accepted and acceptable.
Right.
So you walk a little taller and you like, hey, I feel good about me, as opposed to not doing this and not having that benefit. Now you have those benefits. And so an expectation that this is normal for me, why aren't everybody, you know, you'd watch the news and, you know, you see people having difficulties of one sort or another. How many times have we said that? You know what? If he would just, you know, master up and tell them,
or she would,
or she would just, you know,
it'd be a lot easier.
Right, put her foot down and say, you know what, this is how it's going to be. Then it would be a lot easier.
Right, it's like, oh, it doesn't work that way.
That also points out that it ruins you for other relationships.
Yeah.
Because once you become accustomed to things happening the way you want them to happen, you're less likely to accept another way.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've been sitting around talking to vanilla folks at a conference, or we used to travel, you know, in those circles in the corporate world. And folks, you know, on the outside, I'm like, wow, this one, she's hot, seems to be somewhat, you know, submissive, and wow, that's amazing, wonderful. Until they start talking, and it's like, what? Oh, no. No.
That wouldn't work.
That wouldn't work for 5 minutes.
Right.
No. Well, I would just tell him blah, blah, blah. And we're looking at each other like, yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck. So yeah, and even from the slave side, I think it does the same thing, because we end up feeling like when you're used to being responsive to someone else, and that's what really resonates for you, then when you don't have that being responsive from another person, then it can feel kind of, you begin to interpret that as love. You interpret that as care. You interpret that as being cared for, you know, and so when it's not there, okay, why aren't you doing this, or why aren't you doing, you know, X, Y, or Z, and that can be an issue as well, you know. As well as when you're used to being obedient, when you have someone that is obviously in authority, you have made that agreement, you consented to that, we're going to have a relationship in which you are the authority over me, it gives you a sort of freedom in the way you go through life in other areas that if you didn't have that freedom before, can be kind of off-putting to people who have had to deal with you. Because if you've normally had this kind of internal filter that says, should I do it, shouldn't I do it?
You're looking around at other people.
Right, so you're trying to decide, right, you're looking at them for validation, and now you're not looking at anybody for validation, you're looking at this person for validation. And once they say, yes, I want you to do it, you're like, awesome, and you have that confidence to do it. And, you know, everybody who's witnessing that confidence isn't going to be your friend. You know? Some of those people are going to feel like, why are you all confident? You know, that's not a good idea.
Okay, here's a story from, we used to travel a lot of corporate events and things like that. Seeing a slave walking around being confident, because I determine what's acceptable behavior, right? And so she's walking around being very confident and talking to people and all this kind of stuff. Vanilla guys see that and are like, when we were in D.C. at a bar, and one corporate guy, a friend of mine, we've been friends for a long time, he's like, you're so different. I need you in my life. I need you in my life.
And I'm looking, he says this to me, and I'm looking at him like,
what?
Because I'm like, he'll smash you, dude. And I'm just gonna get out the way. You know, so I'm sitting there and I'm nodding my head. I'm like, okay, well, you know, do you want to? Because I'm a coach, I'm a life coach. So I was like, well, do you want to work together? Yeah, I just need you. And I was like.
The vodka was flowing pretty heavily. I just chalked it up to that. I'm like, yeah, you get a cab and go back to your hotel.
He was like, you have to get your own. He's like,
huh? Oh, I'm sorry, man. No, I didn't mean. Well, I don't know what I meant. You're right. I need to go back to my hotel. So, let's talk about the notion of proselytizing. The definition of which is to induce someone to convert to one's own religious faith, or to convert a person from one belief structure to another. Now, when I first got into this, not first got into it, but midway through it, and I've been doing this for about 30 years, I really was on that thing. Like, I felt like, yeah, one more. I felt like I subscribed to this kinky homunculus theory that inside every person, regardless of their obvious vanilla exterior, there was a little tiny kinkster inside. And if you would water it, or piss on it, or bleed on it, or tie it up, or whatever, at some point it would blossom and they would become a functioning member of the community, right? No, that shit is not true at all. It is not true. And I learned that the hard way from trying to convert people, because I'm like, hey, we've been friends for years, talking to some, friends of mine, and they're like, you always disappear every weekend. What's all that about? Where do you go? What do you do? I'm gonna show you. Come with me to the dungeon.
This sounds like fun.
Yeah, then they come.
They come, and well, here's the thing. Most guys, vanilla guys, if they see a bunch of women walking around, nude, swinging, fat, or whatever, that's called a strip club. Now, when they walk into the average dungeon and see people of all manner of undress and people, the whole notion of play, the concept is lost on them.
Right, it doesn't translate.
It doesn't translate at all. They think that, well, these are obviously loose women, and they, some of them are obviously here for me. I'm like, no.
And we use terms, of course we use terms differently in the community anyway. Like a woman will call me, yeah, I'm a slut, I'm a pink slut, or whatever. And it's like, wonderful, yay! Mainstream world, slut has a very specific, it's a pejorative, so being at the dungeon and people actually walking around talking about how they're a slut, and then I tell a guy who like, well, there's one, and it's like, no, dude, you don't get to discuss people, so we spent most of the party doing a few things, trying to manage them. It didn't help that I was there and I was nude, so nobody knows where to look, and it was just awkward and uncomfortable, because actually how they ended up there, because they were like, well, what's with y'all relationship? That's really awesome. I'm interested in something like that. And he's like, okay, so he brings us in. Well, and it didn't work, and I think the same thing happens even within the lifestyle when you're geared towards power exchange. Just like everybody who is vanilla isn't suitable for the community, everybody who's in the community isn't necessarily going to work in power exchange, and in master slave specifically, and I think it's important to say that because, every type of power exchange is very different. Puppy trainers are the same as master slave, unless those two people want to combine those things. And we do know people who've done that. Daddy girl is not the same as master slave, unless you want to combine those two things, but recognize they are different.
Very different.
And so just because, I happen to be a bottom doesn't mean that I'm going to make a good slave. And just because a person happens to be a top doesn't mean that's going to make them a good master or that they have any inclination to be a master. And I think that's really important, because I can't tell you over the years how many slave-hearted people I have talked to who are doing the build-a-dom thing, which is like, well, no, they're saying they're a top, they're saying they don't want to be a master, but I just feel like they could be. And I'm like...
And they're very dominant with...
Towards me. Are they identifying as a dominant? No. Are they saying they want to be a master? No. But I just feel, consent counts on both sides of that equation.
That's a good point.
And if that person that you're wanting to make into your master is saying that they don't want to be a master, it's just as much of a violation of them as it would be for someone trying to make you be something that you don't want to be.
Right.
And so I think it's really important to look at that, and then also recognize, back to my original point, which is that everybody isn't cut out for this. Everybody is not cut out to be master slave or owner of property. Everybody's not cut out to be dominant and submissive, you know, and the only downside of us not having a specific definition of what that looks like has nothing to do with trying to push it on other people so much as clarity of communication. You know, words are containers for meaning. And so if we understood, if we had one definition of what that looked like, it would be a little bit easier for people to understand that you can be this and not that, but that doesn't diminish you.
Right.
You know, I came into the lifestyle at a time period, it's flipped now, but I actually came into the lifestyle at a time period where to be a submissive was actually considered to be stronger and to have more autonomy and to be more independent and more, you know, all of this than to be a slave. And I actually didn't identify as a slave when I first came into it because I felt like slaves were doormats and they wouldn't, they just do anything, and I didn't want, my first experience with a slave was somebody who said that their master nailed their breast to a board with nails. And being new and all wide-eyed, that scares the chickens out of me. And so I decided I am not a slave because I don't want to get my breast nailed to a board. It was that simple. And it wasn't until I took about 6 to 8 months after I came in to really kind of evaluate what I ultimately wanted, which was a relationship in which I did not have to negotiate, in which I could just surrender everything to the person I was with, and that slavery fit the definition best of what I wanted. Now, I didn't care that people saw being a slave as being less than being submissive. I didn't really care. It was like, well, that's what I am, and I'll find somebody who fits me or not. Now, over the years, it's really flip-flopped in the lifestyle where now I hear people saying, I'm a slave because I'm strong and I have a dominant personality and I'm not submissive. Yeah. So it's really interesting watching that kind of evolution.
Yeah, that definition is totally turned over.
But I think that ultimately what we're doing is we are devaluing anything that we're not. Because as a slave, I don't have to be
a slave versus submissive.
Right. It's not a like
valid in their own way.
Exactly. If that's if that fits the kind of relationship structure that you want, you don't have to put these kind of caveats around them that, well, I'm a slave because I'm strong and I'm dominant. You can be submissive to the person that you're with and identify as a slave. And there's more options than just identifying as a dominant personality or a submissive personality. There's a whole realm, a universe in between that. You know, so when people say, well, you have a dominant personality, and I go, no, I don't consider myself having a dominant personality. If you want to know why, I'll tell you.
It's called master of city.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's like, I don't consider myself having a dominant personality. I'm a leader, but I don't think that's the same thing. Right. You know, and so it's interesting watching that evolution and the impact that has on our ability to identify as what feels good to us.
One thing that Bob and I experienced was the expectation that a master behaves a certain way.
So it's the other side of it.
Behaves a certain way. So when he took on the slave role, he behaved the way he expected a slave to behave. And I went, oh, this is kind of icky.
Right.
And he expected me to behave a certain way, and I said, this isn't. So having that fluidity that you were talking about, seeing that there is shades of gray,
right? Absolutely,
is very important, I think. And understanding and not trying to say that there is a certain way.
Right.
Exactly.
When I talk to, when I've led, different classes with just masters in it, and I tell them we need to consider each other when we are interacting. This is a council of kings and queens, and if we have our own sovereign nations, our rules, our expectations, our guidelines, what is good in that kingdom, from kingdom to kingdom, it'll change. It doesn't make it any less right or any less royal. But in the kingdom of Obsidian, this is how things go. In Jen's kingdom, this is how things go. Both are right. They don't have to be the same. They just have to be right for the monarch who's sitting in that particular throne. So if we look at it like that, it's like there's no such thing as you're not doing it right.
Right.
What do I have to say about your kingdom?
Right.
Your subjects, right? Your subjects and you, sufficient that you all are getting along with. hey, go for it.
It's finding the slave, finding the servant who is willing to serve in your way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then there may not be a match.
Right.
The slave feels that they need to serve in this way, and master says, "That's not my way."
Right. Right. There's only one way for the slave to serve, and that is
in the master's way. That's it.
I guess you understand that. I serve at the pleasure of the president. You damn right. That's it.
That's become a statement in our house. I serve at the pleasure of my master. You know, and I think that is an important distinction, because even within that whole looking at different people and having that fluidity, even within the same relationship. Because I know that over the years, when we were first together, I was in training. He had a lot more, his protocol had not yet been internalized as my way of being. And so I spent a lot more time being quiet. I spent a lot more time observing. I spent a lot more time doing things that, not doing much actually, just being with him and just watching him and not saying very much. And as our relationship evolved and I internalized his will and the state of being that he wanted me to do, the leash got a little longer because he wasn't worried about me going beyond the boundaries. It was no longer an issue. I already know to cut the leash technically, and I'm not going to go any further because I know what those areas of boundaries are. And it was kind of funny because a few months ago we were doing something, and someone in the audience who didn't know us at all and had just come to the thing said, "I don't believe she's a slave," because she was teaching with him and she talked a lot. And I cracked up. In part because our first class, people were shocked to hear me talk at all.
Right.
They thought I was shy, and I said, "I'm not shy. I'm just well trained." You know, he said, "Be quiet." I was quiet. You know, so it was interesting to see that whole, "Oh, you must not be a slave because you're this," and so I think another facet of the whole, you know, being careful about the MS relationship is not being stuck, because just because your relationship is very protocol-driven, externalized protocol-driven at the beginning, eventually, if you keep doing it, you're going to internalize those protocols as norms.
And it becomes a way of life.
Right, and now you don't feel them as protocol, but they still exist. They're just part of who you are. The protocol didn't change. You changed. Right. You know?
And that's why we, to bring it kind of full circle, that's why we think beginnings are so sacred and so special. Because, yes, a person, an MS relationship that's just starting out, is going to look way different than one that's been going on for a few years. Why? You got all these protocols and all these things, and everything's regimented, and there's a lot of right angles to that thing, as well it should be. You know, don't start modeling yourself after Namaste because you see us doing our thing. We've been doing this for over 10 years. You know, you need to understand what your protocol is, because she's doing it. Whether you think she's doing it or not, but she's been doing it for 10 years. You're just starting out. So it's going to be very obvious when you present, when you serve. You know, it's like, it looks like she's just handing you the cup. No, she actually did kiss it, and she always kisses the woman the cup before she hands it to you, or the plate. It's just, you don't see it, because it's like, it's very effortless.
Right, exactly. And yeah, because if you're doing like Master Obsidian, let's say Namaste, do X, Y, and Z, no, you don't recognize how Master Obsidian's hand is on everything I do, and the things that I do are at his directive. You know, so even if it looks like Namaste's in front of everybody and she's doing all this autonomous stuff, I'm not. But again, if you're just starting out on your journey, it would be very easy to look at that and be like, well, yes, I have all this autonomy. I have to grow
put on the play stuff, and then you just do whatever you want.
No,
it doesn't do it.
And that's not how a relationship is supposed to be either. So,
so it does change, but people need to be aware of this when they are coming into it. And to your point, it's not for everybody.
No, and that's okay. That's actually wonderful. You know, I mentor a lot of slaves and would-be slaves, and periodically I'll get somebody mentoring with me. It takes 1 to 2 years. I'm like, if you can't commit for at least a year and a day, we can't do this. And it's interesting to me how sometimes we get towards the end and the person will say, you know what I realized? And I'm like, what? And I'll say, I'm not a slave. And I'm like, congratulations. And they go, I thought maybe you'd be disappointed. I said, how can I ever be disappointed at you knowing who you are?
Right.
That is so beautiful. You know, this is not about me trying to make you into a slave. It's more of trying to uncover who's the slave that is within. And if when we finish peeling away those layers, you go, I'm not a slave at all. I'm a pony. You know, I'm like, go ahead. And I want pictures.
And they're fine. Yeah, and I think that's where we all are seeking to get to, our place where our skin fits us, and we are on the outside who we believe we are on the inside. And those inside and outsides match. And that's why we celebrate you. This isn't for you. It's not for everyone. You know, and I think a lot of the heartache that we see in the community is for folks that are trying to find their way, but they somehow glommed onto this notion that the best and highest is to be a slave instead of a bottom. No, if you like bottoming, then bottom to your heart's content.
Right.
Don't try to be a slave, because this is our MS lifestyle, is our fierce passion and joy. I would do this if there was no community, there was no leather lifestyle, there was none of the accoutrement that we put on. I would still feel most fulfilled in a relationship that has this type of dynamic. So we would be out in the countryside and we'd be like, no, those two people over there are weird as fuck. They're nice folks. But there's something about them that's like, I don't know what the whole deal is with the thing around her neck and the whole, you know, but they would look at us and they would feel that way in the absence of any community or any definitions, you know, where they put linguistic tags on this behavior. So I encourage folks to look for that place of resonance and say, you know, this is for me, as opposed to, hey, is that for you? Well, it must be for me, because I think I can do it too. And then it's not really fitting you, it's not really making you feel good, you know, your heart doesn't feel good. You know, don't do it.
You should only do this if you can't not. Because of the way it changes you. You know, when you're hearing about those changes, you start freaking out and going, I don't want to do this. The fact that it's an option, that you cannot do it, probably means sit with that. Be okay with that. You know, consider it's just because there's so many other options. We have so much diversity in our community. There are so many other things that you can do besides this. But unlike some of the other things that you do, once you do this, it changes you so substantially that, yeah, if I could go and if I didn't choose to be a slave, I uncovered the fact that I am a slave, you know, and there's a substantial difference in that. And I think if you can choose to do something else, then you should. You should, because it's going to change you, and you end up with the fallout from that change, and be like, I shouldn't have done that. I could have chosen something else, you know, and that's where I think you see the difference, and I know in our observations, that's where we've seen the difference, is people who can't do anything else, that even when there's consequences, even when there's less than desirable outcomes, they don't regret
Like,
the
I wouldn't change anything.
I wouldn't change anything. It's tough, but I'm going to keep doing it because this is who I am. People who chose this because they just, you know, this happens to be something that other people were doing, they can go, I should have did something different. I shouldn't have done that. You know, and I think that statement in and of itself, it's not a right or a wrong, but it is something to really sincerely consider. You know, where do I really want to risk it if I don't have to?
Right.
You know, so.
And if you can do something else, do it. You know, but if you can't, then we welcome you with open arms, and it's like, yes, you are my brother, you are my sister, you know, because this ain't easy, you know, but it is so rewarding, and I wouldn't give my life any other way. But it's not for everybody, and that's why we say, you know, things to keep out, as opposed to, hey, come on, kids, everybody, be masters and slaves, it's wonderful. Look, you know, there's a petting zoo. No, don't do this.
Well, and the other, you know, when you just said that, it made me think of when we were in Alaska and we were in the desert in Vegas. And in both of those places, well, in Alaska, they don't even have the things that keep out on, but in Vegas, they do. But if you decide out in the desert, if you decide to go past that place where it says Vegas keep out, then you assume full responsibility for the fact that you chose to go there anyway.
Right.
You know, so if you hear this and you go, I don't care, I gotta have it. Awesome. We did our job, you know? And if you hear this and you go, crap, I didn't know it was going to do all that. No, I don't want this. Awesome. We also did our job, you know? So either way, I think it says a lot. Yeah.
There was the one thing that Bob and I experienced was the connection that he had with his slave. beyond the end of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger key battle is understanding that there is a connection.
Mm-hmm.
There, absolutely, even when you realize that you two have are going in different directions, you are connected always
Yes.
from this experience.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We liken it to two plants that are growing next to each other and they're kind of lined around each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes, it is theoretically possible to separate them and grow them in two different pots, not without losing a lot of leaves and a lot of branches, and there's a lot of stickiness that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But that bond, I think that if you do it in a way that acknowledges the root system, you know, it can be done, but those roots and that bond is still going to, there's some kind of connection there. And
they're both going to need support. Both plants are going to need support, because before they kind of wrap themselves around each other, and that became its own support. And when you separate them, you know, when I've done that to plants, I've had to put a little stick or a piece of bamboo or something to support it until it gets the strength to support itself. And I think that's one of the things that happens as well. It's like you need a little more care, you know, a little more support until you get the strength to be able to support yourself, because that other isn't there.
Which is different, it changes.
Yeah, and having that other there, we're noticing that while I am perfectly capable of making my own coffee, I just really can't. You know, I need him to do that for me. And we talk to people who have that tendency. You cannot sleep without actually doing this, because it's part. It becomes a symbiotic necessity in your life.
Yeah, I can't sit. I always have to be invited to tables. And while this is less of an issue now, when I worked in corporate, when I would walk up to a conference table, I would just stand there. And everybody else would just sit, and I'm just standing there looking around like, who's going to tell me I can't sit down? You know, and then it would occur to me, Master's not here. Oh, okay, I can sit down because he said I'm to do my job well. But I would always have to make a transition, you know, like, oh, I'm at a table, Master's not here, I can sit. You know, and it would always take me a minute, a little longer than everybody else, you know, to do that. And when she went away, you were saying you were making a coffee and you felt the same way, like.
Oh yeah, there were so many little things in my day that I would rely on you for, and even if I wasn't, because like to your point, I can go and do whatever it is. I'm a confident human being, and I can make my own coffee and food and feed myself and clothe myself, all of that sort of thing. But having to do it, you know, made the absence of my slave very poignant. You know, it's like, wow, I'm stirring my coffee and you're not here to talk to, you know, and man, I didn't know how to put this much sugar in my coffee. Back that up a little bit. I'm tasting it and I'm like, this is the taste how she made it. Maybe less sugar. But those things.
You've got a hand up. Lady D, go ahead.
Good evening from Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, how are you all?
Hey, Lady D, how are you?
Looking forward to seeing you at Beyond Leather this year. Just wanted to ask Namaste, if I may, sir, a question.
Yes.
As a slave, I find it really difficult to find people who are in a deep spiritual, mental, and physical journey. As you know, they seem to be few and far between now, especially with the newer direction of our community and how a lot of that is going. So my question for Namaste, without taking up too much time, what type of resources or materials have you found that has helped you along in your journey?
I tend to rely on a lot of spiritual, non-lifestyle resources. I read tons of books from different spiritual perspectives, a lot of the Buddhist books, because they talk about detachment, and that can be very helpful as a slave. I've read some monastic literature, and that's been very helpful. I like to read things about living an authentic life. There's a book called Excavating Your Authentic Self. It's by Alexander Stoddard, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm sorry. That book is by Sarah Van Refnell. And it's a really good book because it helps you kind of uncover all the layers of societal conditioning and things that you kind of glommed on, and you assume this is me. And then you start taking that stuff away and really finding out, oh no, wait a minute, I'm way deeper than that, you know, and that really helped me in my journey. Another thing that I found really helpful, and people always laugh when I say this, as far as the whole surrender thing, was reading the Gore books. I enjoyed them just from the perspective of, especially earlier in my journey when I would struggle with the absolute nature of our relationship and being surrendering. The slaves in those books, they might struggle, but non-surrender is not an option. And I think that really helps me identify with that concept. And that's one of the things that I also got from the spiritual literature, is because people who take those kind of monastic vows, people who are really dedicated to a set path, that act of devotion, the idea of pulling back and not doing that is not even in their head. And I found that in a lot of the literature that I read within the lifestyle stuff always makes it optional. Do it or don't. And that didn't work for me. I wanted something that really spoke to my heart, which was, I really want to surrender, and I recognize it's going to be challenging, but just because I don't like it at the moment doesn't mean I don't want it, you know, and I didn't really see that reflected in very much of the lifestyle literature. So, oh, and Slavecraft. Slavecraft is a wonderful book for that. I consider that a slave book.
Yeah. Another one that I'd throw into the mix is called How to Train a Wild Elephant and Other Lessons in Mindfulness.
I love it. I love it.
Written by a female physician who runs a mindfulness clinic in Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
How to Train a Wild Elephant and Other Lessons in Mindfulness.
Nice. That sounds delicious. I'm going to have to read that. That sounds good. That sounds good. So I use a lot of those kind of resources. I can take, I guess this is a byproduct of being a minister and growing up in the church, is that I can take any sacred text and convert it to be able to look at my owner through the eyes of that sacred text. And that also was helpful. But as far as within the lifestyle, I have a couple of groups that I run for people who are interested in or involved in absolute power exchange relationships. And we keep it, one of the rules is that, you know, the idea is to support the surrender, not to constantly say, well, you don't have to do that, because I think if you're in a surrender support group, you want support for your surrender. You know, so that is really helpful. But honestly, I haven't really found very many groups. If you can make it to Austin, we have an awesome math chapter.
Is that support group local, or is that something online?
It's a Yahoo group, and it's called Exquisite Enslavement.
Okay, if it's okay with you, I'll send you an email later tonight.
Yeah.
If I can send you an email to get connected to it.
Definitely.
Okay.
And also,
Thank you so much.
I would also suggest even Slave Masters group is really good as well. Although the perspective on it is very specific. And it doesn't resonate for everyone, but if you're a gleaner, if you have the ability to glean, like I can take what is useful to me and not feel like I have to adopt a philosophy wholesale, it's a wonderful group for that, because I would say that the slaves in it are also on that path of very spiritual surrender too. So, and I love that group.
And that website is bornslaves.com.
Mm-hmm. Our website.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and our website is powerandsurrender.com, and I have a ton of articles and blog posts and stuff on there as well. And I'm getting ready to put out an actual class just for slaves on just this topic. So, yeah, so contact me, and I'll give you all the juicy details.
I'm posting your website.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? we're about 7 after. Does anybody?
And remember, we have after
We do go.
Time,
We can go.
Change
We can
the structure that we can go as long as the conversation.
Yes.
So you guys just talk as long as there's interest.
And if we're staying up for this, guys on the East Coast, does anybody in the room have an additional question?
We love to answer questions, so please feel free.
You got them captured in our living
About
room.
the subject?
Yeah, about the subject or anything else.
Hearing nothing else, you want to continue then? What did you want to go over?
I think that's about it. We got the high points in terms of how much the power exchange relationship, specifically MS, can change how you operate, and anti-proselytizing now. There's
While we're looking.
That's a lot. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that my growth through the process of becoming a master has been a phenomenal level of understanding myself. And I think that's one of the best aspects of it.
Yeah.
I agree. Self-acceptance. Yeah. We are all connected, and many times when we are trying to find our way to what fits us, that place on the map where we can really identify and say, I am here and I am okay. And the desires and the expectations and the wants and needs and all of that are valid and necessary. And it's okay for me to be who I am and want what I want. And what's even better is that there's a life out there for me that matches my desires. And that's going to be incorporated in this person or in this group of people, maybe one or more or 2 or 3 or 4. But it is like, this can happen for me.
Right.
And that moment of acceptance, I think there's 2 things that happen there. One, when we come to that place, now we're in the place of possibilities, because now that acceptance fuels whatever our future is going to be. Because if I can believe in it and it's happening, then it can happen. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that on the other side of that self-acceptance is the reflective nature of this MS dynamic, where you see those desires being reflected back to you through the eyes of another person, and being their point of actualization, where it's like, I want to be in control of another person. And that other person is saying,
I want to be controlled by you.
And you're like, yes! And so people look at you, why are you so damn happy all the time? It's like, you have no idea, because there's so many people who struggle who never get to that point, whether they're egalitarian or whether they're in community, never get to that point of actually living the life.
Well, I think that part of that, too, that really kind of speaks to something that I think is really important to talk about this, especially as far as things as 2000s, because now if you end up in this and you end up so significantly changed, the effect that has on your sense of identity as far as yourself, there are people who will say, you take it too seriously. You have to keep this stuff in balance. Okay, it's fine to be into this, but you need to be able to do real life. You need to not be changed, basically, the information that you'll continue to get. And so I think that sometimes when you see yourself feeling those changes, experiencing those changes, you find out, oh my gosh, I am changed, I am different, and oh my God, the effect this is going to have on my family, the effect this is going to have on my other relationships, the effect this is going to have on my career, the effect this is having on my choices can be very challenging. Because you begin to question who you are as a person. What kind of person am I? I thought I wanted this. I had this kind of relationship, and now I'm finding that I'm involved in this, and I've gotten so deep that it fulfills me so much that I can't do anything else. And oh my God, this must mean I'm a horrible person, because it makes these other relationships non-viable, or it makes these other things that I was doing non-viable. And so I want to kind of speak to that, like if you're in that place, or if you've been in that place, you're not a bad person.
Right.
Fundamentally, when we talk about, especially if we're here in the space, one of the things that we have is life, living in the pursuit of happiness. you know, that is your divinely given right to pursue your own happiness and
the
you know,
invitation that it has to be pursued.
yeah.
Which means that you need to be in movement to go where you need to go.
Yeah.
And it's waiting there for you. You got to pursue it.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, like, when I was deciding, I can remember, and this was before I even knew about the Nets, you know, but I was getting ready to go through, I was thinking about divorcing my ex-husband. And I was talking to a rabbi because I was converting to Judaism at the time. And I was really struggling with it. And I was like, you know, homeschooling is going to change the kid's life. I'm going to have to go get a job. And blah, blah, blah. I'm tossing all of these really heavy things around. And the rabbi said, the best gift that you can give to your children is a happy mother. Mm-hmm. And that was such a foreign concept to me, that would be the height of my being a good mom would be my own happiness. It was just like, what? I didn't even know what to do with that. I had to take a step. Like, I was like, can I talk to you? I need to really think about that because that's so different than what I've understood to be true for me. And I think sometimes you can be in this state where you're experiencing all these transitions and these changes, and that's what you're feeling is, no, I should not be changing this way. If I was a good X, Y, or Z, I wouldn't have these changes happening. Right. And so having somebody else say, you know, you're not a bad person, doesn't mean that you're just flaky or you just, you know, all the negatives and the pejorative that people say, you're just thinking with your cock, you're going through some kind of, or your pussy, you know, you're going through some kind of midlife crisis, right. You know, taking this stuff too seriously. All of that stuff, don't let any of that steal your joy. Right. And your ability to self-actualize, because this is as valid of a path as any other path that you would choose or that you would partake in. You know, so honor it as that, and honor your core being as that, and don't feel guilty. Don't feel like, oh my God, nobody else understands. You know, celebrate it, and we celebrate with you.
Right, absolutely. Well said.
My mother gave me the same advice. You cannot make somebody else happy until you are happy. Yeah. You have to be happy. Right. And I think it was as I was divorcing and I'm going to be a single mother, and she said, you got to make yourself happy and everything else happens.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how you get it then? You know, it's like, you never knew that nothing was so smart.
Right.
How does that happen?
Right. That's wonderful, amazing.
So,
I was just answering that somebody asked me to, let's see, let me see. Arak saying, before the truth to accept, you have to be happy first. Let's see. And then Nurse V, thank Master Obsidian and Namaste with X's and O's. And is Nurse V still on? Nurse V, we just wanted to send our condolences to you for your loss. We follow that on PET. And so our thoughts are with you, Nurse V. And let me see, I think that was sort of it. Does anybody else have any last minute questions? You can ask them or write them, and I'll say them to Master Obsidian and say namaste. Other than that, it's 1/4 and we will start to shut down. I just want to thank both of you for coming over. And
thank you for having us.
Based on the turnout, we should have you over much more.
We love to.
This is just delightful. Rock has his hand up. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rock. You're on.
What do I say? Was that a butt call? I had no idea that I was raising my hand. Many thanks to all of you. I really do appreciate my friendship with Bob and Jen, but also my growing friendship with you two. I appreciate it immensely. Thank you.
Nurse V is different from Nurse Vicky.
Different Nurse V. Yeah, I know this one. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senior Honey. Appreciate it.
Senior Honey is Nurse V.
Oh, got it. Sorry. Full foot out of the mouth. Moving right along. How did I not know that you were Senior Jaime, I'm so sorry. How did I not know that? I wasn't paying any attention. All right.
Everybody? Okay.
Okay, well, that's it. Well, good night, everybody, and thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Ava.
Thanks, Ava, again so much for hosting us.
Everybody for coming in and staying on.
And 2 weeks from now, what do we have up?
2 weeks from now, isn't that the boot black?
We have Boot Black, and I'm working with Slave Wen out in Master getting that all set up, and so that is what we got. Spirituality
The
and
whole
boot blacking.
question of why boot blacking? Why? I have all kinds of letters. I'm a motorcycle rider. I have a motorcycle rider, and I don't get the boot black stuff.
Oh, this will be fun.
Yeah, we'll have books over.
That is great. That is great. I have a lot of people I want to invite to that one.
Okay, well, no, we're going to start the shutdown process. So we'll say good night to everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Let's see here.